2 inches of snow, which turned into 6. And if you know anything about Washington, D.C., 6 inches of snow in a city that's not prepared for snow removal can be an issue. So despite that cold, we told you that about 20,000 people dressed in coats and scarves gathered at the east portico of the Capitol to witness in the swearing in of our nation's 35th president. And the highlight of the inauguration was a poem that was to be read by Kennedy's favorite poet, Robert Frost. And when Kennedy was elected in 1960, he asked Frost if he would recite a new poem for the inauguration, which Frost agreed to do. He actually finished it on the evening of Inauguration Day. The next morning, because of his bad eyesight and the fact that it was so bright because of the snow, when he got up to read the poem, he couldn't see it. And he didn't panic. What he did is he simply read another poem he had written from memory, which was entitled The Gift Outright. And in the end, no one was wiser. The only ones that really knew that he improvised were the new president and Frost himself. And I mentioned, I think I finished it out by saying that Robert Frost was very well liked by Kennedy, very much admired by Kennedy, and when Frost died in 1963, Kennedy was one of the many mourners at his funeral. During his inaugural address, the president devoted his remarks. Tell me one thing he stated in his inaugural address, Taylor Pulper.
What?
One of the things he devoted in his inaugural address.
Oh, the role of the U.S. in the divided world.
Okay, and what do you mean by a divided world, Mary? He said...
communism and capitalism?
Well, communism and non-communism. Capitalism is good, but we'll use non-communism. Braden, what was another thing that he devoted his remarks to in his inaugural address?
Warned the communist world that the U.S. would remain strong.
Very good. Taylor Warner, how about another one?
The irritable sides to the social world.
Okay, and the fourth one, Emily, what did he do?
He challenged both sides to join forces in the fight against common enemies worldwide poverty, disease, tyranny.
And war itself. Very good. We talked about his inaugural address. It was quite moving. He talked about passing the torch to a new generation of Americans in the inaugural speech, which meant that, we had a younger generation of Americans that were going to try to rule this country or run this country and try to get things straightened out among the problems in the world. He also asked Americans to not ask what they could do not what the country could do for them, but what they could do for the country, kind of making Americans part of the solution to the problems. And he also asked the world not to ask America what they can do for them, but what we could do together to make the world a better place, basically, for the freedom of man. Well, after the inauguration is over, what generally happens? Anybody know once he gives a speech and they're done with the speech, what's the next move, Mauricio, do you know? Right, he has an inaugural parade. And normally they get in cars and they have a big parade. Matter of fact, in this parade, a copy of PT 109 was in the parade. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that happen and they put that together. Jimmy Carter, by the way, walked from the Capitol to the White House, because that's where the parade goes to, because he wanted to show that he was closer to the people, which in that time is very unusual. And the Secret Service was a little nervous. But anyway, the inaugural parade occurs after the president is sworn in, and they travel from the Capitol, the east portico of the Capitol, to his new home, the White House. It's kind of a ceremonial thing. Well, I want to tell you about something I'm going to show you on video. A real historic event happened during that inaugural parade. The president's limousine passed by the Kennedy family, and they had bleachers set up along Pennsylvania Avenue in which the parade route went, and they had some bleachers set up for people to sit in, and the Kennedy family was there. The entire Kennedy family, for the most part, survivors obviously, were up in the stands watching the inaugural parade. And who among the Kennedy family, most importantly, was in the stands? Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr., whose dream had been realized with his second son becoming president of the United States. Just really glowing and a great feeling for that. Well, this is kind of interesting. Picture this in your mind. As the president's limousine, it was an open limousine, passed the stands in which his father and family were sitting in, he looked up and he noticed that his father stood and tipped his hat to his son. And in exchange, the president waved, stood up, and tipped his hat back as they went by the stands. I'll repeat that again. I want you to think about the significance of that. So as the newly elected, or newly sworn in, president his inaugural parade drives past the stands that hold his family, Joe Kennedy Sr. stands and tips his hat to his son, who in turn stands and waves or tips his hat back. Okay, what's the significance of that? Let me see, I'm going to pick on somebody here. Ebony, I want you to tell me, what do you think the significance of that moment is?
He earned the respect of his father.
Very close. He did earn the respect of his father. And for the first time in the history of the family, what did Joe Kennedy admit to? No? Good guess.
Being proud of the son?
Proud of his son, but what, when you tip your hat to somebody, what are you kind of acknowledging? What's that? What? Go ahead. Yeah, he for the first time acknowledged that one of his family members was above him. He was President of the United States. So the first time in the history of the Kennedy family, that small gesture on the part of Joe Kennedy Sr. to his son said to his son, I'm acknowledging that for the first time in our family's history, I have a son or a sibling that is more important or higher ranking than me, because his son was the President of the United States. Okay? And you'll see that in the video. Okay, anybody have any questions over this ending lecture? Now, I'm going to put in these videos, and I want to explain again that these are important. If they weren't important, I wouldn't show them to you. So I want to make sure you're paying attention, and they're going to show you what happens after the, prior to the inauguration, where they have a ball and have a big deal. And you're going to see this in here, and you're going to see some people we talked about, like Frank Sinatra. You're going to see some actresses and actors that were invited to this big gala of celebration on Kennedy's election. Okay? And it's really kind of interesting. And then Ted Kennedy's going to tell you a story about what happened with the snow. And then you're going to have to pick up some things, and you're going to see in the video the situation in which the father tips his hat to his son. So there's some good, really good footage here I want you to watch, okay? Is everybody here today, by the way? Emery is. So, in celebration of Emery being gone, we'll record this. Here we go.
A rare Washington snowstorm on the eve of the inaugural gave the Capitol an otherworldly glow. In years to come, some would see it as an omen of a presidency set apart. But at the time, the weather only threatened the festivities. The Hollywood-style gala, hosted by Frank Sinatra, finally began 2 hours late.
The 1961 inaugural gala, starring Frank Sinatra, Helen Trammell, Ethel Merman, Jimmy Durante, Harry Belafonte, Ella Fitzgerald, Joey Bishop.
These guys, and you don't know because you're not old enough, your grandparents know, this was the stars of the stars. Movie stars and comedians that came, this was the top of the line.
Down the mall, and it was a marvelous sight because stranded motors and people were all the way along, and lots of them had built bonfires to keep warm. It looked as though there'd been a revolution. And the president says, we'll turn on the lights for the driver inside so that people can see Jackie. She looked like the Snow Queen, very glittering, marvelous. We made her step forward so that they could see her.
That old Jack Magic has them in its spell.
There's Frank Sinatra there.
That old Jack Magic that he weaves so well. The women swoon, seemed a lot of men did too. He was a little like I used to do.
Jack Kennedy, growing up Irish Catholic as he did, had this profound sense of the importance of ritual, that the American people want pomp and circumstance when their president is about to be made president. They want a sense that he is king-like, and he played that to the hilt.
Okay, who are those people? That's Joseph Kennedy Sr. and his wife Rose right there waving. Very important couple.
When you add to that his father's experience in Hollywood, where manipulating images is a part of what it's all about. That's what movies are. So you have the sophisticated modern-day techniques combined with this old world Catholic ritualism, and it's an incredible combination.
And I remember riding back with my father, and the snow had started by that time, and the car got off on the side, and here was my father out pushing his car the night before his son was going to be president, so yelling at me to push harder, to push harder. And then the day, of course, was so memorable, clear, crisp.
Wanted to mention one thing. Kennedy was not a fan of wearing hats. You do not see very many pictures or videos in which he's wearing a hat at all. I did not like it, but he did for this occasion.
Cold.
Kennedy, do solemnly swear that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. That I will faithfully.
Watching in the cold, Joseph P. Kennedy quietly gloried in his triumph. His second son, whose cool detachment had always been a mystery to him, had become President of the United States.
My brother had spoken a week before up at the Massachusetts legislature and made just one of the really memorable speeches up there. And I remember the conversation my father had with my brother that night after we got back from pushing the car the night before the inauguration, said, I just don't think you should have used that speech up in Boston, because that was a real humdinger. Do you really have something that's going to, awaken America tomorrow? And my brother said, well, I think so, Dad.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the small undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
Nothing Kennedy had previously said or done had prepared his listeners for his eloquence. His promise of a new era of activism and American leadership resonated across the country, especially with the young.
I was a freshman in college when JFK ran for the presidency, and there was such a sense of excitement about that campaign. He made you feel like things were going to change, the country was going to be different. I can still remember when he gave his speech proposing the Peace Corps and saying to myself, I want to do that.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Passing by the reviewing stand where his parents were standing, and...
What's that?
Was that the guy on the buffalo?
Yeah. You never know what happens in these. But anyway, here we go. This part here.
Okay.
This is a crucial part.
Eunice recalled that she was standing
I got to go back a little bit here.
passing by the reviewing stand where his parents were standing, And Eunice recalled that she was standing behind her father at that moment, and she saw him take the top hat off his head and tip it in a gesture of deference to his son, Jack, the now President of the United States. It was the first time that this authority figure in the family had ever deferred to one of their generation, and it seemed so out of place.
Catch it here.
Just as the father got his hat off to tip to his son, Jack took his hat off and tipped it to his father, the only person he did that to that entire day. And it was almost like there was this moment where he understood what it meant for his father to do that, and he wanted his father to know, you helped me to get here, and I want you to appreciate that.
Okay, that's just a small snippet there. I'm going to put in a video now called The Making of the President 1960. We will have a question on the test in which you have to explain this process a little bit, so this would be very helpful to kind of get an idea of who candidates are, those types of things, and we'll talk about this in the review tomorrow. But this is a very good video. I think you will enjoy. It's basically all footage from that time. Some of it isn't real clear, but it gets the point across, and it should emphasize the different things that I said to you about this in general. So, we're going to watch this through Friday.
I'm Theodore White, author of The Making of the President. John Fitzgerald Kennedy loved American politics.
Who had Theodore White as a biography topic? There you go.
And the story you are about to see tells of one of its greatest clashes. This film was finished shortly before his death, and we have left it as it was then, believing that the noble profession of politics and the men who aspired to lead us are greater in candid recollection.
This is a story of power. This hushed and sunlit room, the President's office, is its inner sanctum. At the end of the ganglia of wires that run from this console quivers the power of America, from thermonuclear striking force to missiles in the deep. Whoever in lonely responsibility must press one of these buttons does so for all the American people. When he moves to create or destroy, he speaks his conscience and theirs, for they have freely chosen him. In the 172nd year of their republic, the American people sought to give this responsibility to a new leader in that rowdy transaction of passion, tumult, and circus called a presidential campaign.
The people of the United States in this last week have finally caught up with the promises that have been made by our opponents. They realize that it's a modern medicine man show, a Pied Piper from Boston, and they're not going to go down that road. I run against a candidate who reminds me of the symbol of his party, the circus elephant, his hands full of ivory, a long memory and no vision, and you have seen elephants being led around the circus ring. They grab the tail of the elephant in front of them.
Came round again, 68 million other Americans would join these first 12 voters to give the answer. By dawn tomorrow, America's power would pass to new leadership. Yet who it was to be, no man could say. It was 8:40 that morning when the candidate arrived at the West End branch of the Boston Public Library to cast his vote. Here in the 11th Congressional District, where he had won his first political victory, he signed in the basement of the library, John F. Kennedy, 122 Bowdoin Street. His education for power had begun 43 years ago. Born in the First World War in a gentle suburb of Boston, schooled at New England's finest halls, he had as a Harvard junior visited England and watched, with his father the ambassador, the decay of English power as Munich approached. Then tasted war himself in the far Pacific. Peace had brought him back to Boston politics, to the United States Senate in '52. Peace had graced him with a new bride, led him to an examination of history and heroes in a prize-winning book. Spectacular re-election to the Senate urged him on to the presidency. Now, home again, after 2 years' pursuit of ultimate power, he must wait the judgment of his fellow countrymen. Far across the continent, his rival too had returned home. Whittier, California was crowded now with the curious, gathering to see Richard Nixon cast his vote in Precinct 33. In this quiet town, a Quaker village, he had been born 47 years ago. He returned now as Vice President of the United States. A sensitive lad, a good student, Dick Nixon had gone from Whittier schools to Duke University, then off to war in the Pacific, then home again to run for Congress. A buried pumpkin, Alger hiss, a strip of hidden microfilm, combined to make young Congressman Nixon famous, led him to the Senate in 1950, sped him to nomination for second highest post in the land under Dwight D. Eisenhower. As Eisenhower's heir apparent, Nixon traveled the globe, debated with Nikita Khrushchev in Moscow. Nixon offered Americans experience and the magic stamp of legitimacy. For Nixon, this was the end of a long road, a road whose tributaries began